Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer back with our most recent Social Change Career Podcast live stream. I'm just checking. Give me 1 second. I'm checking on LinkedIn. Oops. Hold on 1 second. This happened the other week. I'll edit this out on LinkedIn. It didn't stream, so I'll edit this part out so let me just see if it works. Let me try one more time. It's weird because I'm going to edit this part of myself talking to myself because I got everything right. And anyone watching this, just give me a minute. I'm trying to get it to work on LinkedIn. And if it doesn't, we'll just stream to YouTube. And let me just check. Give me 1 sec. One more sec. Says starting soon. View as a member. Just checking if it works. Join. Oh, we might be having another issue. I'll have to ask the platform. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll post, give me 1 sec, I'll post on LinkedIn that we're streaming it to YouTube. And so everyone, if anyone's watching this right now, as often happens with technology, there's technical difficulty. It's on YouTube. Okay. So apologies. Give me 1 second, everybody, because it is very strange. Checking one more time. Join. Just seeing if it worked. Nope. Okay. So I'm going to post on LinkedIn, and then I'll start, and I'll edit this all out in the actual. Give me 1 more second. I'm just posting now. LinkedIn stream. Join us on YouTube. Okay. Okay, so for anyone who was joining us, apologies, start totally over. This will be edited audio podcast. So hi, everyone. Craig Zelzer back with episode 202, nice number of the Social Change Career Podcast live stream. Today, we're going to be talking with Flora Pereira about building a career at the intersection of media and impact. We normally do stream to LinkedIn and YouTube. For some reason, LinkedIn is not collaborating today. So if you're on YouTube, feel free to put any comments. We'd love to hear where people are watching from and share your questions as well and a little bit about yourselves. And 3 quick requests before we get started. So first is follow Flora on LinkedIn. Check out the work of the Pulitzer Center. They're celebrating 20 years. I think it's this year or it was last year, but they do incredible, amazing, fantastic work on environment and journalism and media and AI for impact, and have all kinds of programs, trainings, fellowships. And so Flora will talk a lot about that. Please follow PCDN and in our channels and subscribe to our newsletters. And then the number one thing you can do for a podcast host, whether it's this podcast or any other podcast, is take 30 seconds and share and rate it. Preferably whatever channel you listen on, whether it's Spotify or Apple. If you rate it, it helps, but also just sharing it, because I'd say 99% of all podcasters, it's a labor of love. And, so just take a minute to share it. And we also have, as I said, 202 other episodes. And so you can go to pcn.global, listen and search, or find us on any podcasting platform. So Flora is a Chief Impact and Engagement Officer at the Pulitzer Center, responsible for the organization's theory of change and strategic engagement, communication, and impact programs in the US, Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. She is a specialized researcher in the intersections of gender and environmental rights, and based at Coimbra University, and an advisory board member for Forest People Climate Global Collaborative. Previously, she's worked at CLUA, UN Environment, FAO, and founded Afreaka, a media and education NGO awarded the Brazilian Minister of Culture Prize for Independent Media. She's the author of 5 school-oriented books and more than 400 articles for independent and mainstream media, and co-coordinator of the Ecology and Society Working Group at the University of Coimbra, with a focus on Southern ecofeminist grassroots movements. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia. Flora, you're based in which part in Portugal today?
Yes, in Coimbra.
Okay, cool, thank you. So thank you so much for making time to share your wisdom and questions and work. And so just to think a little bit about, if you had to summarize the focus of both your academic work, your activist work, and your professional work, how would you summarize it, describe it? Are you intersectional media, feminist, researcher, practitioner? How would you describe your current professional focus?
I think the one word would be interdisciplinary. I find it hard. I think my whole history, professional history, academic, and activism has been interdisciplinary. I find it hard to feel within box. I'm a journalist and only a journalist. I'm academic or a researcher and only academic as a researcher. I think fields they connect little with each other, and I think I'm trying to break that within myself, within my own goals, since the very start. So I would know I both on my research history, both on my professional history, I think I've been trying to create bridges between them for the past 20 years. So
Okay. And can you talk first? Let's talk a little bit. How in the world did you wind up doing a PhD in Portugal? And so, two questions: like, what are you focusing on? But also, for people, the average age audience tends to be 25 to 40, but we have all ages from all over the world. And so, how did you decide to do a doctorate degree? So, first, like your wisdom for anyone who's thinking about doing a doctorate, and then what are you actually researching?
um, I've done my first graduation was journalism, and right after journalism, I entered directly to the no professional life. Um, but I was doing some research on communication for development and participatory communication. So it was the first time I was doing an academic research on the first graduation, and I would say it was already quite out of scope of the program at the university at the time. So we didn't have communication for development as a field, and I found it was very interesting to explore, to go after bibliography, to study. I'm a very curious person. I think we never stop learning. We are always learning, and I think the academic side of me is where I find utopia. It's where I think where I can practice my utopia, where I'm studying how ideally the world should be, where we can get deeper and deeper with how it should look like. No, because it for at least for me it's a little bit less practical or pragmatical. You are writing and you are thinking and making connections, and I think I don't get anxiety if I don't see the changes happening now. I think the academic part, it's like a house that takes years to change, where someone is putting a brick and then the other one is putting another brick, and those bricks are thoughts, and those are bricks are ideas. So I think that's how I see the academic field, or that's how I came to see the academic field. I did in and then at my graduation, despite doing this, my first, I would say, thesis, it was a small thesis, but it was the first one on participatory communication. My graduation was very practical, was very journalist, and I think more, not a lot of theory. But then I went to Italy and I studied a program in Roma Tre, a university in Rome. And it was, I think, my first, and it was a master program in communication and philosophy. And I think it was for the first time I entered the post-colonial theory. I got to know post-colonial theory, and I was very interested in understand how a different way of thinking about epistemology. That means of where knowledge is born and what type of knowledge we are talking about, and who defines what is knowledge, and how knowledge is transmitted, and power, and how power shapes knowledge building and knowledge production and knowledge sharing. So I think I got very excited and very curious as well about this part. But then we will talk about, I think I stopped it. That was in 2010. I stopped it for a while, the academic part. I found my NGO. I was a long time with that. In 2017, I was missing that utopia again. I think I was missing studying and reconnecting and going away from practice and going a little bit deeper on theory. So I went back to academia. I did a master in development and society, also interdisciplinary, also with a focus um, um, on post-coloniality. And one of my backgrounds is in African studies and environment. So it was the first time that I decided to combine both, and I studied environmental perceptions at the south of Angola. So I was trying to, but through a political ecology and a post-coloniality view scope. Um, when I finished this, it was the pandemic, and I don't know. I think most of academics will go through what I went. That is, when you finish a thesis and when you finish something, you say, "Oh, now I'm taking a break. Now I'm doing something," but it's like a bug that bites you. As soon as I finish, I will ask, maybe I want to study it again. And I knew I wanted to study, to go through the fields of political ecology or post-coloniality. And I started researching what were the great academic programs on those fields. And there was one here in Portugal, in Coimbra, at the social science program. And I decided to apply. Other personal reasons, COVID in Brazil. There was more than that involved, but yes. Then I decided to apply. At that time at CLUA, I was working very deeply with rainforest issues. So I wanted to continue studying the idea of what environment and climate means, what are the narratives around environment and climate. But I was more interested in the rainforest and land issues. I met those two amazing land movements led by women, one in Congo Basin, in DRC, and the other one in the Amazon in Brazil. And I was so impressed about what they were doing and what they had achieved in the last 20 years and how they had organized themselves and the way they would talk about what land meant to them or what environment meant to them, what forest meant to them, that I wanted to study both of them. So because they are woman-led, I entered, and of course, I had previous work with gender, but I think I entered deeply into the interconnection between gender and environment. I think that's I'll stop here, but just to share a little bit. No, the question was big, and then the answer was big as well.
Oh, no, wonderful. So a practical question for anyone. I mean, I did a PhD. I was crazy enough to do one. And just like a quick story, I remember, and like you, every single degree I've ever done has been interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, which has its challenges and wonders. But I don't like to be boxed in. So every bachelor's, master's, PhD, all totally. So it means I know a little about many things and a few things a lot about. But it is. But for anyone who's thinking about, so two practical questions. For someone thinking about a PhD from the global majority or anywhere in the world, what is your advice? Because it is a really hard journey. And, at least for myself, my wife has a PhD too, Catalina. Like, I thought about quitting a lot. In the end, I just did it. But like, what's your advice about deciding whether to PhD or not to do? And then how to pick a program or funding? So any advice first for someone who's like, I've got this bug and I might want to do a PhD, and what are some questions? And then like, how do you recommend finding a potential right program?
Okay. Um, what to do or not to do a PhD? I think first question: do you want to do full time? Do you want to do part time? Do you want to do while you are working? Do you want to work and do the PhD? I, on purpose, chose the latter. No, I knew I didn't want to stop working, so it was never the plan. So I would say I have a different perspective on the PhD because I see as people will think I'm crazy, but I see this as my leisure time. I just love the PhD. Like I have my work, I have my full-time job, but I try to save a couple of hours a day or sometimes in the weekend to study. It works for me because it's like I have two brains. One is focused on the two work brains. One is focused on the work itself. And when I'm tired of this, and of course I get tired, we all get tired of work, I go to the PhD. And then when I'm tired of the PhD, then I go to the work. So it helps me navigate both. Um, but I am as well. The other thing I remember, people say, "Why are you doing a PhD? You have this full time job, and you love the job as well." So no, but I love reading. I love studying, and I thought, well, a PhD would be a systematic way of doing, where I would have deadlines and where I would have colleagues, where I would have brains to pick on to and people to debate. So I would say the my biggest gain in the PhD were those brains to share ideas, um, to share different ways and profound ways of thinking about the world. Not only the PhD colleagues, but professors, but this network that you form, that are people that want to think deep about society issues. Um, so if you're looking for that, it's a yes. But again, I think I see the PhD with a not with a heavy eyes. I see it, no, it's okay if I will take time. It's okay. I didn't enter uh, any program on purpose. No, so I don't have a strict deadline. I do a part-time PhD as well to be able to reconcile with work. I find that people that do the PhD as their job, that means that they have a scholarship, then they have deadlines, is a little bit more stressful because they need to write and be creative under a deadline. But it's what comes with the profession. Deadline sometimes it will depend a lot on your personality. There are people that works under deadline. I do. If I have deadlines, I'll produce something and etc. Um, and there are people that get very very nervous on how to look for what is the right PhD. I have two tips. One tip is look very deeply into the program. See if the program is interesting. Try to find, even if it's in past course, try to find the syllabus. What was the syllabus of the past course? Did it interesting? Read the bibliography the teachers are sharing, because that's what you will go into. That's the type of knowledge that you will go into. I also come from an academic family, so I was lucky enough to have tips. And one of the tips that my mother gave me when I was choosing my second master, and I was very open at the time. I didn't know what to do. I was excited to study so many things, and I remember having these 5 possible paths. And she said, "Why don't you choose 3 and go as a listening student?" So I took 1 semester before choosing what master I would go, and I did 3 classes as a listening student. That's the word in Portuguese. I don't know if we use that in English.
In English, it's probably like auditing, I would
Yes,
imagine. Yeah.
exactly. And then I did 3 different programs, very different programs. One was in international politics. The second was in anthropology. Um, the third was the interdisciplinary that I ended up doing. And it was very interesting because it was very clear. I got to know really deeply what the courses were about and what was the framework. And then I was sure what path to take. And you can validate the credits, all the credits in the end. So it was, I think, very practical piece of advice that I had, and that I think it works.
And in terms of the comparative study between Amazon, and within Africa, can you talk a little bit in terms of so you're like the central question, or you're looking at how women leaders are organizing around land, like how are you doing the research, and what's like the central questions or the things you're exploring or trying to figure out?
Sure. Um, I'm comparing what are their epistemologies and ontologies. Epistemologies being, as I shared, knowledge production or way of producing knowledge. Then ontologies is the way they relate to the world, of climate, of environment, of forest. So what those names or those concepts means, versus what are those mainstream narratives in COP negotiations or in big climate governances negotiations of what environment, forest, land means. And I do a comparison. No, they live and they struggle, and they have a very emancipatory view of what those concept means, versus something that is a very top-down concept, and that separates nature and humanity. It's very a beautiful phrase that in a conversation with one of the leaders of the movement that I studied in DRC, that's named Fled. She was saying, no, the forest is my pharmacy, is my supermarket. It's a relationship of the everyday with the forest. And another is the coconut breakers movement in Brazil. They call the coconut palms as their mother. They say, our mother, the coconut palm, because no, it serves everything. It serves their life. And so they understand that them and the forest and the land, it's one being. And if this relation and this cycle is broken, they are broken as well. And so it's very different than forest as empty spaces, and forest as empty spaces of knowledge, as empty spaces both for commodification of the products of the forest, no, for capitalist use for the products of the forest, and for a conservation view that those spaces should also be left alone. So it's a relational aspect, or a relational ecology, I would call a relational ecology, and that it's not living alone or considered empty or for carbon or for consumption, but how do we relate, how do we live, and and how do they produce life? I think the comparative, or what I'm exploring and understanding, is that, and I also pointing out, is that those movements, or those grounded movements or grounded knowledge, are very often ignored on policymaking and governance of climate. But those movements should be part of it. No, they should be included. They're not only producing knowledge, but they are producing life itself. So yeah, it's I love study those parts and understanding the way they are relating. I keep learning myself every day.
Amazing. So thank you so much. And we have a bunch of people watching from around the world on YouTube. So let us know where you're watching from. We've got Santosh from Thailand, but let us know your questions. So I want to actually work backwards a little bit. So talk about your current job, then some of your previous roles, then some bigger picture questions. So Pulitzer Center, what is it? But for people who may not know it, is there a connection to the Pulitzer Prize? Is it, and then, I met, I think, one of the first directors of the Pulitzer Center, I think it was Natalia, I forgot her name, but we were media fellows at a conference together like many years ago. So kind of, what is it? What's the scope of the work? And, for people who might be curious about media and social change, or media impact, or media environment, what are ways that people can get involved for training or reading reporting that's done, or fellowships? And then we'll come more to your job.
Sure. So the Pulitzer Center is a nonprofit organization, and we have a scope of funding investigative journalism, or untold stories. Those stories that are very important to be told, but both for lack of funding or lack of infrastructure, they are not being told in the media. So we give grants for journalists around the world to be able to do that. In that part of the scope, I think we have grants, what we call ad hoc grants, where the journalists can apply. They have an idea, they apply with the project, and we have an editorial team that approve and select those projects. And we have fellowships. The fellowships, they are 1 year long, most of them. And we have a cohort of fellow that beyond producing a series of investigations, the fellowships, most of them are investigative journalism. There is also this very two important pieces, that is building capacity for data journalism, for audience thinking, for collaboration. And the second one, it's building a network where silent journalists around the world are investigating and understanding that actually they are not that silent. No, the problem is not silent. The problem is transnational, transregional. So this is the journalism part. And then we have my part that we'll talk more about it, but what we call impact, because with the communication crisis that we are living, and with huge communication changes that we have been living in the past 15, 20 years, we all are victims of fragmentation of information. We are flooded with information. So if before 15 years ago or 20, publishing something was the guarantee of an audience, today it's very far from that. So hitting publish means nothing from the very important work and research and investigation that's being produced to get to the audience that needs to read that story. So the impact side and what we call the full model is that we think that just supporting journalists is not enough. We need a journalism that intentionally thinks about how to reach the audiences, and we need impact strategies that intentionally bridge the gaps between the journalism, between the very important research, and the audiences that need to read that research and that can act on it or can do something about it. We do that before as well, so we are incorporating thinking on how do you strategize before I even write? Who is that for? Who I'm writing for? Who needs to read? And after, in translating that reporting to the multiple audiences that we work with, it can be poems for youth, it can be letters of action for students, it can be cartoons for kids, and it can be policy-making discussions, where we have decision makers that will be put it together with journalists to see the results of the reporting.
And a question, I'm not a journalist. I've done a lot of media stuff, but I'm not a journalist. And obviously I have friends who are journalists and creators. And so the entire media infrastructure, I think, as you were saying, has been radically disrupted, and is both in terms of the commodification of everything, but also the increasing concentration of wealth and power. And and also a lot of traditional media outlets, whether it's print or radio or video, are just doing mass layoffs. Like the business model of journalism in many countries is broken. And so just a question, if you have any thoughts, if people come to you and say, oh my gosh, you work for the Pulitzer Center, it's amazing, and I aspire to be a journalist, like, any thoughts for people? I mean, obviously there's lots of ways to use communication skills that are, the skills of journalism are amazing, and you can use it in many capacities, but your thoughts on people who are like, I want to investigate and report on injustice and truth, and like, where are the careers going? And especially with the AIification and just the commodification and concentration.
I think I would have two suggestions or two line of thoughts for someone that wants to be a journalist. I'm a profound believer of interdisciplinarity, as we said since the beginning. So I think that anyone that wants to be a journalist should be open to connect with the different fields and create those bridges, because I think, and that's what I'm seeing when I work. My part of the work at the Pulitzer Center is working with academic, working with social movements, working with the content creators. all of them find very helpful to work with the journalist and the combination of it. So, no, even kids, I remember when I was giving classes, not at Pulitzer, a little bit before, but I was giving this. I think it was a aha moment for me. I was giving a class to 14-year-old, and I was so nervous. It was my first class to that
Mm-hmm.
age, and I was like, they're going to eat me alive because no,
Mm-hmm.
it's teenagers, and I was not used to. And then I was talking about journalist work that was I have done in Africa. And one of them, by the end of that class, raised his hand and said, "Oh, it was so good, I didn't sleep." And I laughed. And I was okay. And what does that mean? He was, no, because for this first time, instead of studying a history book that I don't connect, you will bring a very real and concrete thing that is happening. And it's life and it's real and I can relate it to because it's happening now. And and I think this is a very easy way to put what a journalist does. I think for the audiences, no, it creates a relatable thing. It creates something that the fact there is a journalist, there is a person that is doing that now and was there, creates a connection, um, and it takes out the coldness of some information on some other type of information. So it works, but it doesn't work nowadays alone. As well as the history book probably no needs to. I'm sure that history teachers are also trying to find ways to teach their students with new and creative things. And I think the creativity that all of us, all the fields need is this intersectionality, no, is those bridges and understand how can we combine a history teacher with a journalist, how can we combine a journalist with a researcher. And the things that we are seeing most effective are in those partnerships. When we are
Mm-hmm.
bringing different strands of the fields together. The second piece is, I think journalism historically was built in a top-down way. Was built that I will publish, I will tell the story, and I will guide what is a story. I will say what is a story. All the journalists would say what um, is supposed to be shared. And I think that's completely broken. Today, there is a shift that needs to happen is that it needs to be less top down and you need to listen to the audience. So it's a little bit less about what the journalists think and more about what are the gaps that the audience that you want to talk um, needs, because there is a lot of assumptions. I worked a lot with audience research, so literally interviewing audiences to understand their perception about issues. And I remember we were doing an interview with students, college students in the Amazon, and we were trying to understand why and how they would connect with journalist stories. And one of them said, well, we know the forest is burning. We know what is the problem. We know, we even know who's burning because no, we are very close to the issue. But does our voice matter? Can I say something? Can I do something about? So we understood that it was not lack of information. That's a very common assumption from journalists that people don't know. And many times people know, but they don't know the next step. So I think understanding your audience and understand in the Pulitzer Center we use a tool that is called engagement curve. That is understand that means engagement curve is how engaged or how aware or how savvy they are about a certain issue that you are sharing. So you need to understand where the audience that you are talking is in that engagement curve to understand more what you need to do. Because if an audience is very low on engagement curve and you are telling them, you are giving them action tools, it doesn't work. They are just learning, they are reaching for the first time. But if they are there, they really know about it, and you are giving information only, like an information, no basic information, doesn't work for them as well. They won't engage, they won't move to the next step of change making. So I think people that want to follow a career in journalism I think for a successful field, a successful career is, on his knees, it's coming, but I
That's
can't.
okay. No problem.
Yes, is this audience thinking, no, in a more active way, understand the audience that you're working has an agency more and more, and the interdisciplinary connection.
Thank you so much. So, you have a very cool job title, Chief Impact Officer. I mean, it's very cool at a very awesome organization. And you started to already talk about this to some degree in terms of like, it's not just about publishing, whether it's print, radio, whatever, and just saying, or looking at the number of views. So can you talk a little bit like, what does it actually mean to be a Chief Impact Officer? And what are, you talk about theories of change or skills. So both like, what are the skills that you've developed to help you do this well? And then how do you actually go about with your partners and colleagues and grantees to measuring impact? Because again, like you can publish a blog or do a video or do a podcast. You can say, 1,000 people or 10,000 people read it or listened or, paid attention for 5 seconds, but that's not impact. That's so like, what does it mean? And how did you develop those skills?
So I see three big questions in this. In this, I
Sorry.
was no, those are fine. And trying to. So the first one, I will leave how did I develop these skills for later, because I think basically it's the sum of all the different experience I had in my career that led to creating this strategy and this way of working. But what does it mean to be? I will start with what does it mean to be the chief impact officer. So I would go back in the what I shared a few minutes ago, that we understand that the story is not enough. It is part of the process, the key part of the process, but that we need to strategically create a framework to design the impact. So design the impact by intention, be intentional about the impact, and go away from, oh, I will publish, and if the story is good, it will happen. So it's a little bit more to try to be a little bit more strategic. And a common expression would be to avoid boiling the ocean. I think it's a very common mistake is to say, who do you want to read your story? Everybody. Everybody is nobody. No, we are living in a world of million people connected. Unless your intention about who you want to reach and what those people are accessing, what are the tools that they are using, what are the channels that they are using, it's very hard that your story will be successful. So basically, it's planning for it. I'll give an example to ground the what I'm saying, the theory that I'm sharing. But for example, I was the other day in a conference, last year in a conference, and I remember a journalist that was sharing a brilliant work, and she had developed three products for her story. One was a podcast designed for. She was researching how a certain investment company was attacking indigenous rights, for invading land that was indigenous land in Brazil. So there was so she divided in three products. So it was podcast, it was on the blog, on their website, and it was on and she did some communication with the indigenous groups. So it's thinking a little bit how you can divide. No, it's the same story. So it didn't affect the story itself, but the distribution of the story. And with the website, she said, we publish in the website because we know policymakers are reading it. So we want this information for them to have access to it, to have access to the data. On the podcast, we wanted to the people that are using, because they were common investors, it was not big investors, it was like day-to-day people
Yeah.
that were investing their salary in the end of the month. And on the third one, it was basically talking with the people that were being affected.
Mhm.
So right there, I think she was doing a great strategy in terms of who are the distribution. But then I posed the question about, okay, but did in the podcast, did you share any options, or did you brought anyone an interview they would say what they could do if not this, what type of investment, what is the alternative, what is the
Mhm.
solution? And she said, oh, I actually didn't thought about it. So when we say about creating an impact framework, is if we create an engagement curve, we are also thinking, okay, in each one of these three products, what I'm going to share about this story, but also what is the complement? Know what, who's the audience right there, what they need, what they will be asking, who are the a partner that you can bring, or a tool that you can share, or a link that you can share. So it's refining that process basically.
Mhm.
No, we have this part of the structure. Um, the second part, and I think is the biggest part that we have so far, is what I call squeezing the juice of the journalism. So
Mhm.
exactly. So
I like
what
that
works?
phrase.
So what works for uh, if you use your own family, what works for your uncle won't work for your niece, and won't
Mhm.
work for a colleague of your that you have in the work. Even in our circle, um, close circles, the audiences and what they read and the way they communicate is very different. So if you ask for each one of those three people I named it in your own family, and in audience people here family, how they would go to convince someone about the importance of gender justice or climate justice, you would go different for each one of them.
Mhm.
It's basically the same thing on journalism. You don't change the product, the story is the same. But what we have been doing is studying audiences that we think are critical around the world, and then creating programs that translate the journalists through those audiences. We've been doing a lot of art, beautiful art exhibitions by one of my colleagues that it called it Vijitra. She's transforming and creating stories and creating exhibitions in Southeast Asia. Exhibitions, performances that connect the journalism with the art community and the public that are being connected, that are frequenting art spaces. We've been working with content creators, no, with content creators that are translating in a more youth language, for example, the content that is being produced by the journalist, or sometimes an interview one-to-one, the journalist talking with the content creators. We've been transforming into cartoons in DRC.
Mhm.
We created a strong partnership with educational community in the Congo Basin that end up even leading to a law change that in DRC that fostered the inclusion of environmental issues in the formal education of primary and secondary schools. And it was after a program of taking journalists to schools through
Mhm.
teachers club, to um, clubs with students, and with the transformation of those stories into cartoons. So that are different, that are more. We also have impact seed funding uh, that we translated this one is more related to partnerships. We were trying to understand how can journalists be useful as well for academic communities, and we launched 4 years ago the Impact Seed Funding, and was a successful. So basically, academic community will apply for a grant to partner with journalism, but with journalists that is supported by the Pulitzer Center, and create a project of outreach with the university audience, with the university community, supported and based on the journalism. So this is the translation. This is the
Mhm.
is in the juice, and is the
Mhm.
part that we call the impact making of the
Wonderful.
journalism.
Actually, I did my PhD research on arts and social change.
Wonderful.
in Bosnia Herzegovina. So looking at kind of talking or writing is important, but it's not the only way to make change. So just two comments there. So one, if people don't listening to this now or in the future, if they don't know about the Solutions Journalism Network, David Bornstein and Tina, I forgot her last name, I think Rosenberg, but they do terrific work on making solutions focused journalism, and it's similar to some of the things that you're talking about. I'm sure and we were fellows at a conference together, and the idea is like so much of journalism, particularly in some places, that the phrase "if it bleeds, it leads." So like a lot of media reporting is just disempowering. Like here's some facts, and it's not engaging. And solutions journalism is not trying to say here's the answer. Is trying to say here's a challenge and here's some things some insights and some ways of looking at it. And I think it's much more empowering. And actually, my wife and I do small scale angel investing in a couple of media platforms too. One's called Goodable. Mohammed Lila, he's going to be on our podcast maybe next week. But he was a war journalist, and again, got tired of. I mean, not that there's a huge space for war journalism, but the idea of just reporting, what does that lead to? So two questions here. So one is, Pulitzer's been doing a lot of work on AI and data centers too, and the environment. And so one is just as the chief impact officer, when you report to your donors, how do you tell the impact of, nothing confidential, but at a collective level across all the partners and grantees and alumni, what do you highlight to say, this is the impact of, and then a question related to that, that's one question. The second question is a lot of things you don't always know the impact, so how do you know, maybe you thought it would be X, but something different happened. So how do you have a strategy, but also have it be flexible?
I'm glad that you asked that, because I think I didn't answer the other question that you asked before about impact, and I think it's all related. It's all the same answer, and I think that's why having a theory of change is worth. What is a theory of change? And we have an internal theory of change that we are building and working towards becoming more public. But a theory of change is a path of change, or an agreement that the organization and the people that are part of the organization have to understand what changes mean. A theory of change creates you a path that maps what are the impact. Impact would be long-term solutions that not necessarily, as you said, you can be directly credible for it. No, let's say improving environmental or diminishing environmental impact, negative environment impact is huge. No, it's a huge impact. How can you prove that Pulitzer Center fellowship stories on rainforests were responsible for stopping deforestation? No, it's so big that you are not the only one responsible for it. It's a network of actors and a network of different types of pressures that will lead to this big impact. So, but it's important that you map, that you design what is the ideal, what is the North Star? If everything goes right, is everything that you aim to do, what that will lead to. This is the impact. Then you have the outcomes. Outcomes would be medium to long-term solutions, but that somehow you can you can prove that you have an impact, that you have a direct responsibility on that. Let's say Pulitzer has a very long history of investigative journalists that have made people, company, governance accountable for crimes that were committed. No changes of law, changes of policies, improvements of policies, or as I said, positive ones. There's an education law that was built after an education program. So those types of change that you can connect direct, but that it's a midterm, no? And then you have the outputs. Outputs are the results and concrete results. The theory of change, and those are the ones that we commit yearly that we need to deliver. It can be the stories, it can be the increase of awareness through survey, it can be these normally are longer lists because
Mhm.
it's a multiple of outputs that will lead to certain outcomes that will lead to an impact. The theory of change is built also based on the history that the Pulitzer Center has it's our not only our belief, but it's a proven history that if we deliver those outputs, those are the outcomes, and we have historically this list of outcomes, and those are the society changes that we will
Mhm.
see. So I think that answer a little bit on how do we measure impact. No, we plan for the output, we deliver the output, we map all the outcomes, no, so we map the results.
Mhm.
But both on journalism and even less in education fields, you cannot, from the 300 stories we support a year, or the other 200 grants we give for the different society types of fields and knowledge to cooperate with journalism, we don't know which one will produce the most of impact. We can say this history on maternity health is the one that will lead to a change on policy for this and this, or this is the one that will change their life, etc. So because you can't do that, that is very different from I will build three houses and that will be a household for three families, and that
Mhm.
means no, it's very direct theory of change. Journalism and education, it's so long term that you need to create a system of what do you believe that you need to do that in long term the change will come.
Mhm.
That's the way we measure, and that's also the way we report to donors. No, we show examples of all of them of the outputs. We commit to outputs, we deliver outputs, we show example of outcomes, and we also show examples of impact.
And like, thank you so much. And so a practical question: can you talk about among the 200 to 300 stories you help support a year, plus the education grants or partnership grants, like how much of what you do is qualitative, quantitative, and then like is there any software you use to I mean databases or stakeholder mapping or just any like that really helps you get a sense of like the relationships and the impact of anything that you've built yourselves, or like a tool that you just helps you kind of stay on track and really look at the you know a project was here and this was an like, how do you like mentally and as an organization like keep track of it all?
We definitely want to also get better at this. We are investing a lot in map what are the impacts and how to put all of them together. Because I think we now have been also mapping in silos inside the teams, and the
Mhm.
way we map in the impact team and engagement team, we use a work plan, and the work plan that has very clear definitions of what are the outputs and how they were delivered. After work with impact for so many years, I don't think there is a right answer that is quantitative is the best and qualitative is the best. My approach is that the mix is what produced the best results for both funders, but for us, for any stakeholders, is to understand that you have a mix of results. No, that yes, you are reaching. You can go both ways. You can say you are reaching millions of people, but then you're not producing change. You don't have a qualitative change, or the other way. Oh, you're reaching 15 people, but you don't have a strong um, support or basis of change. What we say is in that engagement curve, in the basis, you should reach millions because it's a
Mhm.
funnel. So for awareness, for the first entry, you need to think about more quantitative because less of those millions will
Mhm.
come to the next level that it's engaging with the issues and less of those will act on it.
Mhm.
So if you are thinking about action, if you're thinking about direct change, it's okay and should be qualitative measurement. If you're thinking about reach only, awareness only, you should be thinking about millions. The way I evaluate projects when I'm selecting for the engagement grants or is projects that will bring me both that will bring that they will be very savvy and very I think intentional is the word I like most. As long if they are both, I think it's the super project. But if they are intentional and they say, I'm reaching 15, but I'm reaching very important 15 and intentional about quality only, that's fine as well. Or the other way, this is an awareness project. This is building the ground for a next phase. Then it's fine to say it's a digital campaign, but not necessarily with an action component of it. Intentionality, I think, in this case, for me, is what matters.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And just to make a plug for a friend and a podcast guest in May, Michael Shipler at Search for Common Ground, which is they've been doing edutainment, at a level very few organizations do for 40 years, 30 years. And we've had lots of conversations. He's worked in all over the world. Like when you have limited resources, and they do a lot of media and TV and radio and soap operas for change. Like how do you have the maximum impact, where you don't have unlimited resources, but what that impact should be. So is it societal change? Is it behavioral changes, attitudinal changes? That they've done a lot of common ground journalism in conflict areas. Well, they'll bring together journalists, from different identity groups to do common reporting on the challenges. So it's so fascinating. So to go in a different direction here. So Pulitzer Center has been hiring, and may hire in the future. And whether it's at the Pulitzer Center or in your other work, when you are reviewing for, when you talked about funding applications, but when you're reviewing and helping to decide on hiring, what are some things that you make a candidate stand out, particularly in the age of the development industry and even the media industry and the media funding industry? International media funding is radically decreasing from public funding, maybe not as much foundations. So increased competition, lots of AI slop, lots of people looking. And what is your advice, for people who are applying, that makes someone, where you or the team might say, hey, let's interview this person. Doesn't mean they'll get the job.
Yes. I have to be candid about that. I've been recruiting and doing selection process since a very young age. As I founded my nonprofit very young with 24, and I did a lot of recruiting there. I thought I was good at it, but now with AI, it's a whole new challenge because that I would say I need to learn a lot, and I think I need to. I did a lot of recruiting the last 2 months for the Pulitzer Center. We recruited 5, 6 positions, and I think we are navigating a whole world. I had more than 1,500 applications for some of the positions. The minimum was 700. Those numbers didn't exist before. They didn't exist.
Yeah.
So for each one of the 6 applications, the minimum was 700. No, and my assumption is that it was only possible with AI. That before we could see applications from one day to the other rising by 200, 100. And before we would open positions and with lucky 100 and something, and we were already a very recognized organization. I know now it's more. So I want to be candid that I think there is challenges that I will learn with the time, and that we are facing for the first time on how to navigate those. That said, so for example, one big change. No, I am a very a fan of written assessments. I think, especially in the fields of communication and journalism, where we have people that talk very well and are but so it's easier, to have a very good interview. But then in the practices, it changes. So I like to map if in the exercise they are creative, they are organized. I think they are succinct as well. Like with the time that we have today, doing a huge written assessment, it's also something that people don't have time. So you need to be able to communicate very strategically and very sharp in a shorter way or in a faster way. So like mapping those abilities. I think it's harder now with AI because I have reviewed written assessment that were, I could say it was AI because I received it once, and that was not this year, 2 years ago, two identical written assessments. So I was like, yeah, no, there is was not original produced it. And before written assessments were before AI was an easier way to map those skills. Now, because of generative AI, it is harder, I think, but it's still we are learning, and I still think it's very useful. The other thing is in an interview. I think the interview is key as well. I think I would say I'm finding for um, originality as well. No, someone that it's authenticity,
Mhm.
um, and I think standing for what they believe as well. No, not mirroring too much the organization, but saying this is what I want. This is what I. Um, and even if you don't get the job, that means that at least it wasn't for you. I mean, that you wouldn't be happy in that organization. No, so I think authenticity is also something very important, because if you're hired being authentic, the chance for you to thrive in that organization and to have a good job and to stay for years is longer. And we
Okay.
can map that in the interviews, I would say. No, if the people is if the person is, I think those are a little bit my few
Yes.
insights. Yes.
Yes. I mean, I've hired a bunch and talked to lots of employers, and it used to be, let's say between 50 to 3 to 400 applications. Rare occasions it could be, five, but it is now, it's often 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000. And it's really, and, there's a place for AI. I mean, I teach on AI for impact and research and consult, but it's really changing the nature of work and hiring. And yes. So we have about 5 more minutes. So can you talk a little bit I mean, I've co-founded two NGOs. One doesn't exist anymore, and one still exists. Like, we thought we are going to change the world. We did interesting work now. But like, a little bit about your Afreaka. What did you do? Are you, what's the organization's doing today? And for anybody who's crazy enough to start an NGO, especially in this environment, any thoughts?
Um, so I think I was very young, and my background, I was passionate about African studies. I was a journalist, and I had this dream of going to Africa since I was 7 years old, 8 years old. Um, I lived in Brazilian. I lived in Europe very young. And I remember that when I came to Europe, it was France at that time. Brazil is very Eurocentric. No, so we are taught in school that we we are Europeans. We are descendants of Europeans. That all the African history is hidden, both in education, both in media. We have 2 pages of African history, normally in a very passive way. And when I went to Europe, I very clearly was said that I didn't belong. No, and when I went back to Brazil, I was very curious about this other part of the history that was hidden and that I was not being taught. So I think I started exploring and studying in both Latin America, but at the time, especially African related issues. When I did my journalist graduation, everything I could do, I would do about Africa journalism or journalism in Africa. Um, of course, as everybody that doesn't know a lot, I started with a stereotype vision about it. And more I read, more those stereotypes would break. I would break my own stereotypes about it. And more I learned how the media was stereotyped about Africa. So I decided I wanted to go around the continent and write about Africa without stereotypes. That means digital media, digital art, sustainability, everything that was not being said at the Brazilian media.
Mhm.
Um, I I did a research on it. So I researched 5 mainstream journalism in Brazil and in other 3 countries. And what I mapped was what journalists was saying about Africa was poverty, hungry, wars, or safaris. And I did a crowdfunding. So for, for those starting, I think crowdfunding was my of a nonprofit. It worked. I'm a communicator. I was a communicator, so I founded with a graphic designer that also
Mhm.
did beautiful works about. So we had a good communication strategy for it. I would do PR about
Mhm.
the crowdfunding. We appeared in many medias, so it worked. And I lived in and traveled around 16 countries in Africa, writing about those this other side that was not
Mhm.
being exploited in Brazil. How did it become a nonprofit? It became because when I was in Brazil, in Africa, many professors and students start writing me to talk about how those content was not in school and were not in
Mhm.
university, were not in research, and wanted to use those contents. When I went back to Brazil, it started like I was drawn to education. So that's how I ended up writing 5 educational books. And basically, they were content that would talk about African and African issues through a pedagogical point of view to be studied. No, I partner with the education minister, but with education secretaries and pedagogues, um, pedagogical professionals that would that worked with me to build curriculum material. And it was a gap. No, I think for founding a good nonprofit, you also need to find an important gap. No, a nonprofit is doing something that first or second sector is not doing,
Mhm.
and it's a gap. It will work and it will thrive. Sometimes I think things will appear to you. So we are often portraying media. I think we were hired in many cultural spaces because it was a content that was inexistent.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it's
Is it still going?
no. I think when for other reasons we'll leave for a second
Mhm.
interview. It went. We for 7 years um, we worked in 3 pillars. There was the media pillars. It
Mhm.
became a network of 120 writers that I would give courses on how to write about Africa, or how to write about South collaboration. That basically was how to write without stereotyping.
Yeah.
Um, and those the students would produce content, and we end up became this network. I would also be I was the editor
Mhm.
of collaborative authors that would send their material. We had the education pillar that we
Mhm.
produced content for primary, secondary, and university education. And the third one, that I think the one that became one of the most important, was the cultural pillar. We ended up doing a festival, a yearly festival in São Paulo, the city of
Mhm.
São Paulo, um, with like a public at the time of 15,000 people per festival. So it was a huge festival with lectures that would, we call it Afreaka, meetings between Brazil and contemporary Africa. So
Mhm.
meeting between those South thinkers and knowledge producers. Um, it's still a portal, but unfortunately, this month is off because we are rebuilding it. So, and it's still like many organizations and teachers use it, and we keep receiving it as um, um, asks or requests or
Mhm.
things like that that we support. But I would say now it's an archive. No, it's an
Okay.
archive
Okay,
of
we'll
content.
put that in the show notes. So to start wrapping up, so just I think one very simple question: what's the best channel to follow you on? So is it LinkedIn? Do you do writing, blogs, or have a news? I mean, there's the Pulitzer Center. Obviously, go there. But for you as a professional,
It's LinkedIn. I think it's
okay.
where I communicate more. It's through
Mhm.
LinkedIn, little bit on Instagram, but I
Mhm.
think a little bit less. LinkedIn has been my main channel.
And then for people who are interested in the intersection of media and social impact, because there's a lot of disruption in the industry. USAID used to be a big funder of some aspect of media. The Trump administration destroyed that, and again, a lot of bilaterals and multilaterals are cutting back. Foundations not as much, but where do you go? Like, do you go to a conference at like the Perugia Festival? The media thing. Like for people who are interested in this, like where do you go for community? Like do you have a conference? Do you have a newsletter? A WhatsApp, like any places you go just to be inspired or to share ideas with others?
That's a very good question. I wanted to share that the Pulitzer has launched the Impact Initiative, um, and this initiative started with supporting previous grantees and fellows to produce new impact and new from their stories or engagement strategy for their stories. And we launched a survey trying to understand the field of impact in journalism, and
Mm-hmm.
this is only the beginning. So the idea is that we are doing both this pilot and the survey to understand the gaps and starting a network that would
Mm-hmm.
have more, um, I think, more solid grounded or sharing of information and meeting spaces as well. So the goal is that in the next year we are launching all of those pieces, being the launch of the survey itself.
Okay.
I think following the Pulitzer Center channels is the best way to being connected with that. We have multiple newsletters, and many of them focus on the impact of journalism. So I think I would suggest that as a very good source. And in those, we are always sharing what are the different journalists doing, because
Mm-hmm.
this we feel and we are perceiving this field increasing. So more and more journalists interested to do that. Perugia, I think it's a beautiful festival. It's happened today. It's happened
Mm-hmm.
this week, and it's also increasing. I think the presence of this type of discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Festival Gabo, where you in Colombia, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's also a beautiful festival. We will be there. We will be launching hopefully the impact survey there, and there are plenty. Of journalist festival or communication festival that are now going towards this know the history of the audiences or the history of what happened after you published. And I think it's the beginning of something, but it's happening. There is
Okay.
one that is you can see online. It's next week, and I think there are plenty of conversation around um, impact, and a couple between communication and impact is this call forum. I'll be there
Mm-hmm.
next.
Yeah.
So also a couple to follow. I think the names that are there also super interesting are
Yeah.
people that are working on this intersection.
Yeah. And Skull, you can register. I don't know if you can still register for online because they
Yes,
have an
exactly.
online
Yeah.
component. So I think. Last question. It doesn't have anything to do with work, but any book, movie, or show that's just occupying your brain in a good way. That you again, it doesn't have to have anything to do with professional, but like something that you might want to share with others.
Yes, do you know when I entered the PhD, I was, oh yes, because I'm reading too much, so it's okay to be a little bit away from narrative
Uh-huh.
romances, and I've
Mhm.
changed that in the last few years. That I need that. I need the reading that is, that is the romance, and now I'm trying to always be reading.
Uh-huh.
And I'm a mother, and I just reached the most beautiful phase that my son is 7, almost
Yeah.
8, and he loves to read. And every night that I put him to sleep, um, we decided that we are now, I used to read to him, and we decided that we are now, each one of us, reading our own books. So
Mhm.
I couldn't be happier, and just sharing a little bit that I think it's so important. And every time I read something that it's not or academic or not a journalist, but there is this artsy part, I think it just mess with a different part of your brain that makes all the other information lingers, no stay. So you process this in a different way and give you strength to the next day. you continue this more, I think, tough part of the work. If we work with impact, we are working with sometimes tough issues. No, it's not that easy. Um, there are crimes, there are accountability, there is so many things to do. So I think art is essential and literature is essential. I'm reading, I'm terrible in pronouncing, but it's let me translate because I'm Pétalas de Sangue. um,
And you can always send it to me and I can put it in the show notes.
Petals, yeah, Petals of Blood. This
Mhm.
I'm reading this one from Niguji Yachongo. It's a Kenyan author. I've just started, so it's a hard one to read. It's not the one that you has been fluid, um, but yeah, and it's taking me to a different world and a different time, um, that I'm
Yeah,
inspired to. Yeah.
yeah, we have a 15-year-old, but like he used to be hard to get to go to bed, and most nights I would read to him as like one of the most mad. Sometimes it was like, okay, I'm done reading, and he would read, but it is one of the most magical things. And just two books I'm reading. I'm doing more audiobooks, but 1929 by Aaron Sorkin is really interesting about the economic crash. Just fascinating, but a great storyteller. And then Enshittification by Cory Doctorow, just about like the destruction. They're totally different books, but just super fun. So we'll finish here. We went a few minutes over, and again, for LinkedIn, apologies that live stream didn't work. I will communicate with the Wade video team because I thought I had fixed it. So again, as we started off, please follow Flora on LinkedIn. Please check out the Pulitzer Center, both the amazing, I just saw two articles recently on data centers, one in Argentina, one in Thailand, I think, but just like really good reporting and in depth, but not, but still engaging, not just like presenting horrible things. Maybe they'll be hiring in the future and for grants and the database. And stay tuned for all the things you were talking about in terms of impact journalism. And please follow PCDN. And thank you so much, Flora, and have a wonderful afternoon or evening.
Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate not only this invitation, but the whole program. I've also been following you for